Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Kevin Steinhauser at Fiveable, and tonight we are working on our final multiple choice of the year through Fiveable. So I see that some of you are asking how long to expect tonight. I plan on wrapping up at about the hour mark. We might actually get done a couple minutes early, but it should just because I want to make sure we get to those questions and emphasize what we need to emphasize. So as always, if you have a question, pop it here under the ask a question. I don't always keep up with the chat, but you feel free to use the chat as we are live tonight. All right, so we're working on multiple choice. I will launch into my slides here in a minute. Again, it's our final multiple choice of the year through Fiveable. So it's just another round of deliberate practice. It will look very similar to last week if you were with us last week. So I want you to know what's going to happen as we are very close to the AP exam. We're about 2 weeks away at this point. So a week from tonight will be our final normal Tuesday session. That's going to be a pretty like hands-off session in terms of new content. It's really going to be some test-taking pointer strategies and mindset, excuse me, game planning as you're getting into the final week of preparation. And then we will have some cram sessions for all three types of essays. So if you've been with me or not through Fiveable this year, we'll have some pretty short, sweet sessions on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, leading up to our big Wednesday AP Lang exam. All right, so again, if you have questions, let me know. I'll pop back and check these. If we do have any questions through the live session, I'll come back and make sure we get to every question before we're done for the night. But I'm going to launch into my slides, which go over multiple choice tonight. So multiple choice, again, is a super important part of the AP exam. So I'm glad you're here tonight. I'm glad that you are taking some time to do this deliberate practice for one final time on Fiveable this year. So again, May sessions, we've got 4 in May, 2 on Tuesdays. So next Tuesday is the last final one. Remember, these are for Fiveable Plus members only in May. So if you're not a Fiveable Plus member yet and want to come back next few sessions, make sure you do get that signed up for before you forget. And then Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, synthesis, analysis, argument. We'll do some cram sessions. All right, so let's launch into multiple choice tonight, though. If there's any other questions, I will make sure to answer them. If you were with me last week, I'm going to go over the basics here for about 5 minutes. This is about the same. Last week, there was a lot of questions, so we talked more at length at these points. So I wanted to make sure we spent enough time with the actual multiple choice text itself, our final one of the year. So again, you know this, 60 minutes for the full-length multiple choice. It will be the first thing you do on May 15th, our exam day. Expect 55 questions. It'll be in that 52 to 55 question range. Most likely it will be 55 questions. And this is 45% of the exam. So I'm glad you're here tonight. The first hour of your exam is worth almost half, so we want to make sure we're at our maximum capacity here. So I talked about this last week. I'm just going over this again because I know there's new faces in and out every single week. So the first minute of the test, make a game plan. So the game plan should look like this. Refresh yourself on how many passages and questions there are. So you just take 10 seconds to flip through. Okay, good, there's 4 questions. I'm sorry, there's 4 passages. There's 55 questions. This is exactly what I expected. Now I'm comfortable. I know what I'm up against. A lot of you will determine, okay, what order should I take this test in? I said last week, and I hope you remember this if you're with me, view the 4 passages as 4 small tests, as opposed to one big test. It's a little bit less daunting than is for timing. So most students have to guess at some point on the multiple choice round. College Board certainly makes this difficult to finish on time and at your best. So if you take a 15-minute quiz, you're not going to spend 10 minutes on question number 8. You're going to skip it, move on, and only come back to it if you have time. So I want to make sure you have time to get to every passage. However, some of you at this point in the year realize, okay, I don't know if I have the stamina to get through all 60 minutes at my peak. So it might make sense to save the hardest passages for last. If you have to guess on like more than 2 or 3 of a single passage, it should come from your most difficult passage. You're going to determine the difficulty, and then you're probably going to want to put them in order. So that's optional. Some of you will just want to answer 1 to 55, and that's fine. That's what I would do. But then a lot of my students, and a lot of you might want to say, okay, I'm going to do the hardest passage last. Let me identify the easiest passage and start to build some momentum here. So you're going to determine the order. Again, it could be 5 passages, but I'm fully expecting it to be 4 passages. That gives you 15 minutes each. So again, you've got 4 small mini tests within this big 1-hour component. As you're putting these texts in order, the older the year, they will always tell you the year of publication. So the older the date of publication, the more difficult it likely is. And also look at, just as a skim, this takes a minute to game plan. What's the organization of the text? If there are many paragraphs, you actually use that to your advantage. If there's big chunks of paragraphs, that's a signal that it could be a more difficult text. Paragraphs tell you a shift in topic or tone, so the more paragraphs you have, the more that the author is signaling something to you. When it's a big chunk of text, a big paragraph, you have to identify the shifts in topic or tone. All right, so once you've determined the order, do this for each passage. Again, 4 small tests to make up the multiple choice round. So I'll always read the background information. It'll be 1 or 2 sentences. Please read that to guide and frame your reading. Don't go to the questions. I don't recommend that anymore. I used to, and then I realized a lot of the students who went to the questions first weren't prioritizing the reading. And the whole point of my live session tonight is my whole point of any multiple choice live session I've done this year. Prioritize the reading. So step 2 is read to comprehend, not to look for answers. So that's why I don't even look at the questions. Read to comprehend. I promise you, you will get more questions right that way. But you got to take 8 or 9 minutes here. And that actually, when I tell students that, like I free you up to say, okay, 8 to 9 minutes out of your 15 minutes per passage, because it's more than half the time. But you will actually find yourself getting more of the questions right and actually finishing on time. Of course, it does take practice, so make sure you're practicing this way the last couple weeks here before the exam. So we're going to talk about how to annotate and why to annotate. So I'm going to tell you how to annotate, and I'll model that again tonight. Again, if you were with me last week, I know a lot of you have come, the last 2 or 3 weeks with me on Fiveable. You've seen this, you've heard this. This is not new. But annotations keep you engaged. And number 2, annotations actually save you time. So we've all gotten to the end of a passage. I certainly have many times when I start to zone out, my mind wanders, or I'm just like going through the motions. I'm seeing words on the page, but I'm not actually soaking them, and I'm not actually comprehending. It's not because I can't comprehend, it's just because I'm not giving it my best. Well, annotations, and I might not realize that till it's too late. So annotations force me to make sure I am giving my best. If I get to the bottom of a paragraph and don't know what to annotate, I need to catch myself and re-engage. And then secondly, let's say I am fully engaged, and let's say I am reading it really well the first read through. But annotations actually save you time. So it's a 5 to 10 second investment for every paragraph. But again, I've got 8 or 9 minutes to do this right. That is safe round, because every multiple choice question, I shouldn't say every, 80% of multiple choice questions, I will flip back to my own annotations. Now, College Board will have like a spread of papers. So on the left, and it's stapled kind of all the way down the middle. On the left will be the text, and on the right will be a set of questions. So I recommend, even if you flip the page, so like you've annotated the text, you answer 1 through 6. You flip the page, you'll see the exact same text again. So College Board's trying to be friendly there and let you look back at the text without like flipping a bunch of pages. However, I actually recommend when you're on questions 7 to 15, that second set, you flip back to the first page, because that's where you've annotated. You've invested the time, so it's absolutely worth flipping back and making sure you're reviewing your own annotations. So don't look at what I call a naked text when you have not annotated well. Always look at a clothed text. You've clothed it with your beautiful annotations. All right, so with that said, you're taking your time, you're going back. But honestly, if you take 8 minutes to annotate and read at a high level, you've got approximately 30 seconds per question. That's going to go super fast, but that's what we're going to practice with tonight. That's what we practiced with last week. Once you make sure you have a high level reading of the text, and again, this is practice makes perfect. It definitely is easier said than done. And I got a lot of questions last week, both during and after the live session. How do I get better? What if I get to the 8 minute mark and I'm still not confident? Well, you're going to go as confidently as you can, but through the passage. At the 8 or 9 minute mark, you do have to cut your losses and go to the questions. You're not supposed to get 100% right. So there's going to be questions where you're not going to want to invest the time. So you might just take your best guess and move on. Don't take more than 30 seconds per question. Now, this is all going to be personalized for you though. So you might realize, okay, there's going to be some types of questions that might take me 40, 45 seconds. So I'm going to invest the time there, but that means I have to answer some questions even faster than 30 seconds. So again, we'll practice tonight, but what I think is this. If you do it this way, you're going to realize if I take 8 or 9 solid minutes of reading, the questions are going to be answered pretty quickly. So there's a huge sense of urgency. I do not have time for 1 second of a brain break. Maximize that rest brain break period between the multiple choice and the essays, but you need to be fully on your A game in terms of like effort and capacity for these 60 minutes here. We need every single minute for this multiple choice round. So here's how I want you to annotate, and then we're going to start to practice. And this is just my recommendation. This is not how I've always taught AP language. This is what I've done after this is my 9th year of teaching the class and really figuring out what works best for students. Now, if you're getting, if you practice this and you're going down in score, it's 2 weeks away. Don't blow up what you do. However, try this and see if this works for you. So I'm glad you're here tonight. Let's try this kind of communally together. So first, you're going to underline key phrases as you read that anchor you in the text. The phrases that you're going to pull out are easy to understand and ones that go to the main idea of the text. So that's what you're going to underline. It doesn't have to be the whole sentence. In fact, in AP language, you're going to get sentences that are ridiculously, annoyingly long. Underline the core of the sentence. That actually helps with your comprehension. And then second, every chunk of text, sometimes it'll be 1 paragraph as a chunk of text. Sometimes it'll be 1 paragraph as 2 or 3 chunks of text. We'll see that tonight as well. So you identify the chunk based on the shift in topic or tone, and then you write a quick summary in the margin to represent that chunk of text. Again, that's a 5-second investment. The 5-second writing of an annotation does not take long. So a lot of students ask, in fact, we talked about it for a few minutes last week, the annotations just take me too long. What do I do? Well, the reason the annotations take too long is because the comprehension is taking a long time. And that's what the whole point of this test is. Are you tracking the text? Are you comprehending the whole point, the nuance of the text? So if you can't annotate quickly, it's because you need to slow down and comprehend. And again, easier said than done. We're all at different reading levels, which is why this is a very difficult class or content to teach, because it's not like a content class where everyone comes in with the expectation of 0 knowledge and then the teacher builds your knowledge. We're coming in with a wide variety of reading and writing skills. So the whole goal is that every student continually improves throughout the year. So it's not really fair to compare yourself to the person next to you in your class. It's only fair to compare yourself to what you did a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Are you getting better? And that's the whole point here. And then the last thing that I want you to do, I don't think we'll see this tonight really, but when there's a vague pronoun, I circle it and I draw a line back to the antecedent. So you'll get some questions on this, maybe 1 per passage, so 4 questions total is my prediction. This is what this will look like. In line 15, it refers back to A, B, C, D, E, and they give you a word above it in the text. So you're going to do that as you go just because that's a thing that good readers do. Okay, it refers back to whatever the antecedent is. I should not move on from it or they, whatever the vague pronoun is, without a strong belief that I know what it's referring to. So I'm just taking a second, tracking it for my comprehension, and also I don't have time to reread a text twice. I barely have time to read it once. So 8 or 9 minutes really figuring out how to annotate effectively is an investment of your future time for that multiple choice round. 30 seconds a question goes extremely fast. So let's just take a minute to talk about that question round. So if you take 8 or 9 minutes, you have on average per to answer the associated questions. Now, quick side note, not every passage is going to be exactly the same length and even has the exact same amount of questions. You'll have between 13 and 17 questions per passage. So just keep that in mind as you're budgeting your time. On average, it'll take you 15 minutes, but there might be one you want to get done in 13 to give you 17 minutes for a longer passage. Again, always flipping back to your own annotations, the clothed text that you've clothed with your annotations. Quickly reread the context, look at your annotations, look at what you underlined. So you're going to look at the question stem, flip back to your annotations, answer it in your head, and then match your answer, which is honestly probably right, to the convoluted AP language answer. When I say convoluted, their wording is tricky at times. So if you have your answer in your head, a better chance of actually answering the question correctly. All right, again, you're using process of elimination. You're not getting lost in a question. The question's taking you more than 30 seconds. Take your best guess, move on. You might have time to go back to it, but you probably won't, to be honest. This is a very difficult test. So don't plan on coming back to it unless you're ahead of schedule. All right, and then guess with 1 or 2 remaining, with whatever questions remain. Take your best guess and then move on from the passage, because I want you to treat each of these as a 15-minute quiz. Again, this is just my recommendation. If you have a better path for you, great. But the whole point of this recommendation is get to every question, see every question, and therefore you have to get every passage. A lot of students who don't have a really firm plan in place, so I'm kind of giving you plan A to practice with or to make sure you use on May 15th. A lot of students who don't have a firm plan in place, often honestly, that happens in every state, every country that this test is taken, every year. So make sure that doesn't happen to you. Give yourself an advantage here by making sure you have the time figured out. Every time you guess, you know this probably, use the same letter. I'm going to do a quick pause, answer a couple questions, and going here. All right, so any tips on when guessing on a question? All right, so yeah, honestly, go with your gut if it's a blind guess. But you're going to use process of elimination. So the better answer here is this. Take the 30 seconds, do what I just said. Read the question stem, look at the passage, look at the context, look at your annotations, and then look at answering it in your own head. Once you're answering in your head, use process of elimination, and then just go with the one that seems to answer your, or get in, align with, is what I'm looking for. Align with your answer, take your best guess at it, and then move on. And here's what I would say, forget about every previous question on previous passages. You're just fully looking at like literally answering the best questions you've got and then moving on, so you're fully committed into the next content or next passage. And I would do the same thing with the essays. Once you write your synthesis essay, forget about it, don't even think about it again. So we'll talk about these cram sessions as we're going. So cram sessions, our cram crash sessions only for Plus members. That's how we've set up Fiveable. And I also, for Plus members, I have a ton of like content that we've done all year. But yeah, starting tomorrow, because tomorrow is May. In May, it's Fiveable Plus only. There are no more free live sessions. So highly recommend. It's a good use of like $8 or $9 to make sure you're using this. Really, hopefully worth it for you guys. So yeah, we'll do 4 more sessions after tonight for Fiveable Plus members only. Last question before our practice. How many questions are going to be about citations? Oh, that's such a good question. So the trend has been more and more each year. So we'll make sure to hit that you feel comfortable and hit on that. I don't think our passage tonight has citation questions, but I'll say this about citations since you brought them up. Make sure, really the only way, and I see someone in the comments just asked this, the only way to prepare for citation questions is to expose yourself to them. So again, we just practice or buying a book for like 15 bucks on Amazon that have some citation questions. But here's what I'll say. Look at previous citations that you've had on AP multiple choice and know two things. And here's all that the questions are going to be. One, know the purpose of the footnote. And two, know the pieces of the footnote. So again, purposes of the footnote, pieces of the footnote. Here's what I mean. Pieces of the footnote, what's this piece of information? That's the author. What's this piece of information? It's the article title, the publisher, the date of publication, etc. If you know those pieces in and out, you're going to get some freebie questions. You'll get like one or two of those type of questions. And then again, I don't think we had this in our practice here in a minute, but what I really want to think about is when you get to a footnote in the text, pause and read the footnote and then go back to the text. Basically, here's what I want you thinking about. The footnote is part of the text. So if you view it that way, I think you'll do better. A lot of students don't get the footnote questions because they don't honestly read the footnotes or they skim the footnotes. I actually read and annotate footnotes, and I recommend that my students do that, so I recommend you do that as well. With all of that said, a purpose question for the footnote or the citation is going to be this. The purpose of footnote 3 is primarily to A, B, C, D, E. So you just treat that as part of the text, and if you do that and you annotate well, you will, I think, get those right. Honestly, footnote questions are, I'm glad you asked this, Kevin, because footnote questions are 5. So there's going to be some with 0, and there's going to be some with like 2 or 3. So it's going to be like 5 or 6 questions. Purpose, you can get those right. That's just a high level reading. There's no explicit way to prepare. You just read it with the flow of the passage. And then 2, you do have to explicitly prepare for this, and that takes 5 minutes. Know the pieces of citations, and just know MLA and APA citations. Again, you can look that up or ask your teacher for help. I don't have that tonight with our practice set. Again, 5 questions, not the majority by any means, so we'll focus on the majority tonight. However, 5 questions, I'm glad you asked because you can definitely make sure you're prepared for them. All right, let's go to our practice. So what we're going to do is practice annotating, and I'll do that full group, and then we'll practice 30 seconds a question with your same strategies when we get to the questions. We'll look at the question stem. We'll go back to the passage, and then we will look at what you think your answer is and what best aligns to your answer. Before we do that, we've got to make sure we have a high level understanding of the text. So I've annotated for us tonight, but this is my model annotation. This is how I would annotate the passage. I've identified each slide, the chunk of text, but I'll let you know if it's indented, it's a new paragraph. If it's not indented, it's like part 2 of a previous paragraph, the paragraph that was started on the previous slide. So on the right are my marginal annotations. Again, that's a 5-second investment. And then on the left, I'm annotating the most important content here. So always read the background info. It's 1 or 2 sentences. So I'll start there. The passage below is excerpted from an essay published in the early 20th century. Every child has to learn the language he is born to. So our subject here is language, and right now we're starting with children. So I underline this. Always emphasize the topic sentences. This one was pretty easy to understand. It is certain that he will make mistakes in the process, especially as he is not taught it by any wise system, but blunders into what usage he can grasp from day to day. So the first small paragraph here what I'm getting is this. Children learn language through usage. Let's just pause on the first two sentences, or the first sentence and the first clause of the next sentence. Every child has to learn the language he is born to. That makes sense. It is certain that he will make mistakes in the process. I pulled that out because those are the core phrases so far. Okay, longer paragraph here. Now, if an adult foreigner were learning our language and we greeted his efforts with yells of laughter, we should think ourselves grossly rude. I underlined that, and then I annotated that in the margin. You'll see. It would be rude to make fun of adults learning a language. That's my representation of this entire thing, but it's all stemming from that topic sentence here. Okay, let's keep reading. And what should we think of ourselves if we further misled him by setting absurd words and phrases before him, encouraging him to further blunders, that we might laugh the more? And then, if we had visitors, inciting him to make these blunders over again to entertain the company. So right now I'm seeing a juxtaposition of children and adults. In other words, the first paragraph talks about children learning language, and then we're going into, in the second paragraph, a hypothetical scenario of an adult foreigner, and obviously the implication there is someone who speaks a different language, learning the language. And we would not treat the adult foreigner unkindly. He says it would be rude if we did these things here. And the implication here that a high-level reader is making, so I'm sure that you're making, is we do these things to children. So he's pointing out a double standard here. We don't treat children learning language like we would treat an adult learning language. This is actually part 2 of the previous paragraph. So I've identified a shift in topic here. Yet this is common household sport. This would be, maybe this would be like a pronoun antecedent thing that I would circle. This goes back to how we would hypothetically treat a foreigner who doesn't know our language. All right, so yet this is common household sport. So long as there is a little child to act as zany for the amusement of his elders. The errors of a child are not legitimate grounds of humor, even to those coarse enough to laugh at them, any more than a toddling baby's falls have the same elements of the incongruous as the overthrow of a stout old gentleman who sits down astonished in the snow. So a really high-level reading strategy that I'm practicing with you tonight, and that I want you to continue to practice these final 2 weeks. Don't get lost in the text. We underline these core phrases to ground ourselves in the text. So let's just look at these. This is a common household sport. The errors of a child are not grounds for humor. So I get that. We should not be making fun of children, just like we wouldn't make fun of adults. I'm not going to get lost into like random tangents or metaphors. I'm clearly getting to the core of the paragraph here. So part 1 of the paragraph, it'd be rude to make fun of adults learning language. And then part 2, people often make fun of children who are learning a language. Again, I would see in my annotations clearly this double standard. All right, small section here. A baby has to fall. So literally we're talking about a baby falling as he or she learns how to walk. It is natural, it's not funny. Or I'm sorry, it is natural and not funny. So does the young child have to make mistakes as he learns any or all of the crowding tasks before him. But these are not fair grounds for ridicule. So in other words, we should expect and encourage mistakes from children because mistakes are required in terms of learning. We should be making fun of children when they make mistakes. So I underlined a couple key pieces here, and then in my margin, we should not make fun of children because mistakes are natural. Okay. Next paragraph. So that was a tiny, kind of a transitional paragraph. Now, let's begin. He begins an anecdote here. I was walking in a friend's garden and met for the first time the daughter of the house, a tall, beautiful girl of 19 or 20. Her aunt, who was with me, cried out to her in an affected tone, "Come and meet the lady, Janie." All right, and I just have identified a shift here. This at the beginning simply says, or I simply would jot down, he sees a lady. Honestly, that's enough. There's nothing that needs to be underlined here. This is all easy to understand. I just want to make sure I'm tracking the flow of the text. So I put a bracket here. he sees or she sees. It's unclear what the author's gender is. So you'll hear me say he or she. So she sees a young lady. Let's move on. Oh, sorry. This was actually a tiny transitional beginning of the anecdote. This is actually a new paragraph. The young girl, and this is a long paragraph. The young girl, who was evidently unpleasantly impressed, looked annoyed and turned aside in some confusion, speaking softly to her teacher, who was with her. Then the aunt, so we've got four people. We've got the speaker or the writer, we've got the young girl, we've got the young girl's teacher, we've got the young girl's aunt. Then the aunt, who was a very muscular woman, seized the young lady by her shoulders, lifted her off the ground, and thrust her blushing, struggling, and protesting into my arms, by way of introduction. Naturally enough, the girl was overcome with mortification, and conceived a violent dislike for me. This story is exactly true, except that the daughter of the house was aged 2.5. So go back. The only detail that she changed was the girl was 19 or 20. So I just put a couple dots down here as I've chunked this section of text. This was an awkward introduction, and it's important to note the daughter is only 2.5. So she did that very intentionally. In fact, the author put this side note, very important detail, in parentheses. And the point here is that taking those 8 or 9 high-level minutes of reading. The point here is that this seems like a ridiculous introduction. She's shoving the girl to the speaker and like making a very awkward introduction. It's kind of like the girl loses dignity, right? We would never accept that for a 19 or 20-year-old, but we would accept it for a toddler. And that's her point here. She's saying this is a double standard. Why should and would we accept this for a toddler when we would not accept it for a 19-year-old? She's pointing out the double standard of how we treat people depending on their age. I want to show you something that I use for my annotation strategy. I do this a lot in my own classroom, where I ask the students to find the core of the sentence. You want to read every word. You want to understand every word. But to A, help you with comprehension, and B, make sure that you are tracking the text when you're going back to your annotations, like during the multiple choice round. Underline the core of the sentence. And sometimes it's going to be split up with extra phrases. So here's the core of the sentence. The aunt lifted her off the ground. So I would just cut this out in my underlining to actually help me A, comprehend like what is the core of the sentence, and B, that's all I'm rereading when I'm flipping back to my annotations. I'm not rereading all of this. Again, I actually want to save myself time here. Only read the most important pieces. And I did it again. So she was protesting into my arms. All right, let's keep going. New paragraph. Now why, in the name of reason, courtesy, education, justice, and lofty and noble consideration, and then I just underlined this because she's kind of repetitive here, why should 2.5 be thus insulted? What is the point of view of the insulter? Underlined this is a core sentence here. How does she justify, this is not a vague pronoun, but an example of that would be circle she, draw a line back to insulter, right? How does the insulter justify her brutal behavior? How does she justify her brutal behavior? Is it on the obvious ground of physical superiority and age and strength? Is that why she's being mistreated or mistreating the toddler? It cannot be that. So she asks a question here and then she answers the question. So it cannot be that. For we do not gratuitously outrage the feelings of all persons younger and smaller than ourselves. In other words, let's give her the benefit of the doubt. She's not bullying this 2.5-year-old out of like a mean spirit. Let's keep reading. A stalwart, 6 foot, and I don't know how to say this correctly. I'm going to try. Subtugenarian. It's probably genarian. And that's someone, well, actually, let's finish the sentence and let's talk about if we don't know what this word means, which I'm not expecting you to. So a stalwart, 6 foot, septuagenarian does not thus comport himself toward a small gentleman of 30 or 40. I'm not going to get lost in that one word. The point is, we don't mistreat each other just because we're bigger than them, right? I hope you were able to pull that meaning out. But let's actually talk. What if we get a vocab question on the meaning of this, which is possible? You'll probably get 4 or 5 vocab questions, vocab in context. Subtugeranian. I keep saying it different every time. This is a parallel word with this. Because look, 6 foot, is parallel with small. So septuagenarian is parallel with 30 or 40. So it's actually somebody who's older is what this is. And that's really all I need to take away from it, right? So septuagenarian is someone who's significantly older than 30 or 40. I don't need to know that definition, though, in order to understand the context here. And that's my whole point. Don't get lost in a word, and certainly don't let a word get in your way. Look for the high-level meaning of the text. So let's finish this paragraph. It cannot be relationship. So again, why do we treat people this way? Well, it can't be. She just is giving a lot of reasons why. She's using process of elimination here. Why we don't treat people badly. We treat people badly, but these are not the reasons why we do it. All right, so it cannot be relationship. For such conduct does not obtain among adults, be they never so closely allied. For such conduct does not obtain among adults. In other words, it can't be just because of our difference in age or our relationship status, because adults who are older than each other don't mistreat younger adults. It's a specific problem to young children. That's the point here. We're still unpacking it. Let's read the last sentence I underlined. It has no basis except that the victim is a child. Kind of what I just said. This is a child-specific problem. And the child has no personal rights which we feel bound to respect. That's a key sentence. We don't respect the rights of children. Let's see how I just jotted this down. And you might even be more specific and less wordy as you're annotating. But get to the core of the paragraph, the chunk of text, every time. The reason we mistreat children must be because we don't respect them. That especially is here. So the point that I want to make on this slide is advanced readers know this. So I want you to know this. Not every sentence is created equally. Do you have to read every sentence? Absolutely. But we're underlining the most important ones because that's a sign of a good reader. This is support, this middle portion, for really this claim. These are not the reasons why we mistreat people. It's a child-only problem. This is the last paragraph. It's long. We'll go through it relatively quickly, and then we'll start to practice. All right, so I underline, again, really emphasize the topic sentences. Now notice this topic sentence I only underlined the first half of, and that's very intentional. Always look for the most important phrases and clauses. So let's read. A baby, when good, is considered as a first-rate plaything. Considered is obviously the adult, and then it's just elaborated here. A baby is a toy to play with or to play on or to set going like a machine top that we may laugh at it. So in other words, babies are just there for our entertainment. Now you should know at this point, like you should be able to pick up, the author is criticizing this societal trend. The author does not support the fact that we treat babies like toys. So let's keep reading. There is a legitimate frolicking with small children, as the cat plays with her kittens, but that is not in the least inconsistent with respect. Grown people can play together and laugh together without jeering at each other. So we might laugh with our children, even more than we do, and yet never laugh at them. The pathetic side of it is that children are even more sensitive to ridicule than grown people. So underline these two sentences. I'm going to read them again. So we might laugh with our children even more than we do, and yet never laugh at them. He's saying we can laugh with children, but let's not laugh at them. And then the pathetic side of it is that children are even more sensitive. So he's saying it's pathetic that we're laughing at children because they're more sensitive than if we laugh at each other. All right, let's finish this paragraph. They have no philosophy to fall back upon. So the they, this might be an instance where you circle they and draw a line back to children. They have no philosophy to fall back self-restraint. If they must, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. If they try to turn the tables on their tormentors would be the adults, then the wise grown-up, in quotes because again, he's being critical of the grown-ups, promptly punishes them for disrespect. Disrespect's in quotes, so I underline that sentence. That's kind of the whole point of this paragraph. Disrespect's in quotes because he's saying the kids aren't being disrespectful. They're fighting back for their rights. You're being disrespectful as adults to the children. Last sentence. They must respect their elders, even in this pitiful attitude. But who is to demand the respect due to youth? Okay, how I put this in the margin, always do this. Even if you're like, I got this, I'm not going to forget, take a 5-second investment. It's very likely that at times you will forget, okay, what was this paragraph about? So you're jotting it down. We should stop laughing at children, and then again, focusing on the hypocrisy here. It's hypocritical, to punish children for disrespect if we don't actually respect them. I think that's like really spot on, really clear language here. Now, couple questions, and then we'll do our practice round. Okay, thanks for the questions tonight, everybody. How many rhetorical devices do we have to know? Oh, God. We talked about this last week. My teacher tested us on some really obscure last week, but again, I know there's some new people coming in and out. So here's the deal. Don't worry about random, obscure terminology for the test. If your teacher expects you to know them, obviously you want to know them for your class. So I'm not saying rebel against the teacher, but I will tell you this. You are probably getting, or your teacher's getting multiple choice passages that are a little bit outdated. So don't stress. So you might want to know them for tests in class, but you will not be tested this year on zeugma or metonymy or synecdoche or just all these random terms that you've never heard outside of AP language. So you want to know terms like juxtaposition, but really that's to empower you in your writing. It might be in a multiple choice question. Like you're not going to get a question like, what rhetorical device is in this line? A, B, C, D, E, random term. So take that weight off. I'm reprioritizing, looking at why are we doing what we're doing. We're taking 8 or 9 minutes to annotate. That's because they're changing. Identifying terminology while annoying to have to study and memorize them are actually pretty easy questions. We don't have those anymore, though. Our questions now are all about a high-level comprehension of the text, which is why I recommend this annotation strategy. All right, so I just was skimming through the comments, too, and this kind of goes to part of what I was talking about here. So some of you are like, yes, isn't it taking long to annotate? And yes, absolutely, that's because we're talking through it. I'm trying to make sure we're understanding the passage because we're about to go on to the question round here, in which we'll do 30 seconds a question. But please remember this, take your time to annotate, but that takes you 5 seconds. So I'm gonna finish this. I think that answered that question. And just look here, me jotting this down, and again, I think you should be a little bit more concise than I've been for my slides, but writing that down took 5 to 10 seconds. Like let's just say that's how quick you got it. The hard part here is figure out what to write, but that's the whole point of a high-level comprehension. So if it's taking you a while to annotate, it's because it's taking you a while to comprehend the nuance of the text. That's not a bad thing, guys. These texts are hard, so don't beat yourself up if it's taking you a while. But again, the goal, as you've been practicing all year, is a 15-minute segment of a passage, 8 minutes to annotate, 7 minutes to do the questions, about 30 seconds a question. All right, one more. Oops, I hit the wrong button. One more question. What's a good way to determine the mood of a passage? I always get stuck between two similar adjectives. Oh, you know what? That's a great question. Here's the only thing I'll say. You're going to most likely get a tone or mood question at the end as like one of the last questions on, let's just say, every passage. So you'll probably get 4 tone questions. That's just a trend that has not gone away. Use process of elimination. It's hard, and here's all I'll say. You'll have to just know the nuance of the tone. So instead of studying terminology like zeugma, or however you say it, synecdoche, metonymy, those, it actually makes sense to study tone words. Write down tone words that you see on some multiple choice questions and know them. For example, didactic is a tone or style, whatever they call it, that you'll probably see because you see it a lot. Pedantic means preachy. So if you see a tone word multiple times, like as you've been practicing or as you're cramming practice, write it down, memorize it. Unfortunately, that's the only way to get better. But I have good news. If you get to the top 2 and guess, you have a 50% chance of getting it right. So I know like we'd rather get to a 100% chance. But again, don't sit there and stare at it you either know the word or you don't, right? So take your best guess, go with your gut once you've narrowed it down, and move on. That's my best advice. It's really hard to teach vocabulary because let's maximize our minutes. In my classroom, I don't teach vocabulary other than I say, hey guys, like if you know this, if you've seen this tone word and don't know it, I want you to know it for the future. So that is good advice. The more tone words you know, the more nuance between tone words, the better off you'll be on those type of questions. Okay. Let's launch into. We will look at the question, and I'll time you 30 seconds as we're working. Now, I said earlier, and I misspoke, if you remember, I said 100% of the time you'll flip back to your annotations. And then I changed it to like 80% of the time. So what you'll do is identify, do I need to flip back or not? And again, flip back if you think you should. If they tell you in paragraph 2 or in line 15, absolutely take the 5 seconds to flip back and familiarize yourself with the context. However, a question like number 1, which talks about the passage as a whole, you're not going to flip back and reread the whole passage. So you might flip back and look at a couple of annotation points, but really, you know the passage pretty well if you just spent 8 minutes of a high-level reading and annotating round. So here's what I want to do. The primary purpose of the passage is to take 10 seconds to get the answer in your own head. I tell my students this, by the way, don't start the questions unless you can tell me, and obviously you're not going to tell me on the test, but if you could tell your teacher what the primary purpose is. Because you're probably going to get one primary purpose question per round 2. Plus, if you can tell me that, you know the passage well, you can start to answer the questions. So word the primary purpose in your head, and then take 20 seconds to match use process of elimination, which one best aligns to it. Feel free to type your answer into the chat to see how you're doing, but you have 30 seconds. What do you think it is? Go. Okay, 30 seconds seems kind of like a long time. So that's a good thing if you feel like, okay, what am I waiting on? That's going to happen tonight. I'm sure sometimes tonight you won't quite be done at the 30-second mark, but I'm going to keep timing you just so you can get into that practice. So answer B, critiquing a common practice. So your answer was probably, and this is what I would hope. So the primary purpose of the passage is to, and you would tell me to criticize the fact that we're making fun of children so much. And then you would just say, okay, which is it? Okay, to critique a common practice. There's not really a solution that's detailed. It's more of like the critique of the common practice that's detailed. But a lot of you might have said A, but the solution hasn't been offered. It's just stop doing the problem, right? All right, number 2, we are going to flip back every time. I'll go back to my annotations. We'll look at them. So one contrast presented in the first paragraph is between. So let's go back. We'll do 10 seconds. And I know that seems super fast, but I'm going to time you to identify the contrast in your own words and then match it to A, B, C, D, or E. What contrast is presented here? All right, let's flip back. Hopefully you have your answer in your head. You start using process of elimination. Okay, I'm going to flip back actually one time. I know some of you might need to kind of go back and forth. So obviously you do that as much as you need to when the paper is right in front of you. So let's look at it like 5 seconds and then 5 more seconds. And 5 seconds to get your answer locked in. And time, answer C. formal and informal learning. Let's see where that is. He has not taught it by any wise system. That's the formal learning, but blunders into what usage he can grasp from day to day. That's the informal learning. As we saw in the next paragraph, we learn from mistakes. All right, I'll go back. I'll stop at like question 7 and see if there's any questions that we have. But I'm going to go pretty quick to make sure we do get to finish every question. I have 12 questions tonight, so we're 2 in, 10 to go. Number 3, in the course of the second paragraph, this is long. You see it's line 6 to 21. The focus of the argument shifts from, we're going to do this one together, actually. Just look at your annotation. So I've identified a shift in this paragraph. So slide 1 is the first half. Let's just look at my annotations. It would be rude to make fun of adults learning a language. And then my second, people often make fun of children learning a language. So the first half is adults, don't make fun of them. Second is children, we do make fun of them, although we shouldn't. All right, now with that in mind, adults first, children second. My annotations got me here. What's the answer? Feel free to throw it down into the chat, see if you all agree with each other as you're using process of elimination. Go. Ten seconds. Now, you could tell me the answer in your head pretty easy, and that's what makes this tough because their language is difficult. So again, you would have told me the argument shifts from talking about adults to talking about children. Okay, so let's look at the answer. E. Adults' language acquisition to children's learning in general. All the rest maybe have half of it right, but the other half is wrong. So again, use process of elimination. The moment you see a word or phrase that disqualifies the answer, cross it out, and then you're just going to process of eliminate your way, hopefully to the correct answer, to the best answer. So let me say that very clearly. The best answer is going to be right the entire way through. The second best answer is going to be right maybe 80% of the way through. Look critically for what's wrong for each of them. If you can't find something wrong, go with it. 4. The author's word choice in lines 14 to 16 serves which of the following? So let's just go look at that. And as we're rereading it together, to think about what's the purpose here, what's the function. Function and purpose are synonymous. Yet this, let's find that right here, first sentence. Yet this is common household sport, so long as there is a little child to act as zany for the amusement of his elders. So we're talking about, remember that this is making fun of children as they're learning. This is common household sport. What's the purpose of this sentence? So long as there is a little child to act as zany for the amusement of his elders. Take 20 seconds. Go ahead. Five seconds. Answer. A. It helps establish a characterization of children as playthings. Hopefully that was pretty clear. Common sport is, again, playing with them, making fun of them. All right, in context, we're at the exact same line. Line 15, the word sport is best interpreted to mean. Let's just reread the sentence one more time. Yeah, this is common household sport, so long as there is a little child to act as zany for the amusement of his elders. Take 20 seconds, we can do this one quickly. Best answer. Process of elimination. All right, time. Answer B, entertainment. I think that was the easiest one so far if you're doing a high-level reading of the text. We'll do 2 more questions, and I'll just see if there's any questions that you all have so far. Which of the following best describes the rhetorical function of the third paragraph? So let's go flip back. The third paragraph, just these 4 lines, so pretty short. Let's just go back. Let's look at what I underlined, what I put in the margins. What's the purpose of this paragraph? I'm just reading what I underlined. So does the young child have to make mistakes as he learns? Okay, but these mistakes are not fair grounds for ridicule. I put in the margins. Again, you might even condense this as you're writing marginal annotations. We should not make fun of children because mistakes are natural. What's the function? Go ahead. All right, 5 seconds to try to get there. Time. The answer is D. Remember I even said this, and I didn't do this intentionally because I looked ahead at the questions, but this is like a transitional paragraph, I said. So it restates the author's argument at a transitional place in the passage. The author's argument, we should not be making fun of children. Do 1 more, then I'll just check for questions. The primary function of the anecdote recounted in the 4th and 5th paragraph is to, let's just go back. What was that anecdote about? Oh yeah, the awkward introduction where he told us at first that it was a 19-year-old girl, and then we realized it was a 2.5-year-old girl, where she was awkwardly pushed in like his arms, like lifted her off the ground and thrust into the arms of the speaker. That was awkward. What's the function? 20 seconds, you can do this. All right, 5 seconds. Time. Answer is A. Emphasize a point by presenting an absurd example. Now again, I did not look at this and then make my annotations. I annotated it like I would on a high-level reading without looking at the questions. But my word was awkward. Their word was absurd. Hopefully we got that right. All right, let's pause just to check if there's any questions so far. We've just got a couple. Kind of the halfway mark. Now I know we're on the hour point, guys. So if you need to go, I totally get it. We're just being really thorough tonight, since this is our last multiple choice review. Hang with me if you would like. If you need to leave, feel free to come back and check out the end on the replay. As long as you're a Fiveable Plus member, you have access to every replay that we've done all year. Let's look at this question. What are the main types of passages you can get for a multiple choice portion? Okay, I'm not sure if I understand the question. The main types of passages you can get for the multiple choice portion. Let me answer it, Eliza. If this doesn't answer it, pop up your question in a different way, and I'll try again. What I think you're asking is what content to expect. So first, and I'll just do this really quickly. It's always going to be nonfiction. It's usually going to be short standalone speeches or essays, but it could also be excerpts. In fact, it's a trend. So you'll probably get at least 2 excerpts from a nonfiction book or larger work. But it's always going to be nonfiction. And here's the trend. You're probably going to get 4. And you're going to get at least 1 that's pretty modern, so 1900s. And you're going to get at least 1 that's older, like 16 or 1700s. And they're always, because there's going to be 4, going to be on different super random topics. Like today, we're talking about making fun of children and why we shouldn't do that. You would not get another passage about children. They're going to be super different because they're not assessing content. They're assessing, can you read a random text at a high level? All right. My teacher has not reinforced knowing certain rhetorical devices, tone, mood words. So are there any tips on how to memorize and retain them? I'm going to be honest. We talked about tone words in a previous question, but don't lose sight of the priority here. first of all, don't memorize rhetorical devices unless your teacher's asking you to for a quiz, right? Don't do it for the test. And second, even though I said memorize tone and mood words, that's kind of like a work in progress. So you might want to say like, okay, what are the 3 tone words I'm going to control between now and May 15th? Pedantic, I gave you one of them. Maybe you'll see another 1 or 2 as you're going. Like tonight, if we get to a tone question, or another day as you're working with multiple choice in your own classrooms. But I'd say let's focus on what needs to be focused on. If you can narrow it down to the top 2 tone choices, like Kevin said earlier, you're going to be in a good spot. So don't stress about memorizing a bunch of stuff at this point in the year. Stress about a couple more deliberate practice rounds. I'd rather have you stress about timing than anything at this point. That's why I spent so much time up front with it, really talking about like make a plan, and I gave you my plan A. So I know that I'm not answering your question super directly, but I'm doing that on purpose because I don't want you stressing out about memorizing a bunch of words and like spending your time in the wrong spot here. So at this point, maybe grab 3 tone words that you expect to have to see again. Pedantic is the one I'll give you tonight. But look at the tone words, see how you're doing with tone. Again, you're not going to get more than 4 passages or questions out of 55 on tone. You're going to do your best on them, not something worth like freaking out about and stressing out about. So you can ask your teacher, like, what's 2 or 3 tone words that I should know, that I absolutely want to know, but don't act like right now you're going to memorize 100 words. That's not effective, right? That's not the way I want you using your time. If you have follow-up question, Eliza, again, please repost it and I'll answer it at the end. Yes, that's what you mean. Awesome. For the first question I just did. All right. This does not pertain to the multiple choice portion, but any tips on how to work with a passage for one of your essays? Yeah, I don't have time for that because I want to honor everyone's time with the multiple choice. Again, come to the cram session. I'm really thorough and straight to the point on all 3 types of questions. I think you're talking about rhetorical analysis, so I'm just going to say this very briefly tonight. You're going to annotate a rhetorical analysis passage similar to what we're doing tonight. So I actually tell my students that a rhetorical analysis passage is the same as a multiple choice passage. Each multiple choice passage is proving something and using writing choices to get to their point. So you're going to do it very similarly. Underline key phrases. The difference is you're not annotating in the margins for summary of content. You're annotating for writing strategies. So the difference is you have to more explicitly think about who the audience and author are in a rhetorical analysis passage than you do in a multiple choice passage. That's all I'm going to say about that tonight to honor everyone's time with multiple choice practice. But again, hopefully you guys can come back at the cram sessions. I definitely plan on having those be hopefully super valuable. I got another one. Do you know how many multiple choice questions we need to get correct? Yeah, absolutely, to get a passing mark. It's going to be in the high 50% range. So I always tell my students 60% just to kind of round up. If you get 60% of the multiple choice questions correct, so you can kind of track how you're doing tonight. And obviously we're more thorough tonight and we're talking it out. It's harder when you're doing it on your own in a high stress environment. But if you get 60%, you're on track for a 3 on the exam. If you're getting 5s all the way across on the essays. So obviously it's kind of a big calculation. If you get a 6 on an essay, you can do slightly worse on multiple choice, or at that point then you start to try to get that 4. And then ultimately you want to get that 5. So between, if you're shooting for a 3, 60% is your goal. If you're shooting for a 4, obviously the essay should be your goal. That's super difficult. So again, if you do really well on essays, you can offset that. Likewise, some students' multiple choice is actually their strength. They can offset their essay score with a really strong multiple choice round. All right, let's get back and let's finish off the multiple choice. Again, I'm going to stay as long as it takes tonight to answer everyone's question. If you need to leave since we are at the hour mark, I totally understand. We have a few more questions to do. Let's get back into the zone here. In the 6th paragraph, I'll flip to that in a second. The author advances her argument by. I'm going to flip back to it. We don't have time to read lines 42 to 56. Let's take 10 seconds looking at my annotations, and let's take 20 seconds, answer this in your head, and then see which one most aligns. The author advances her argument by. Okay, so my annotations. The reason we mistreat children must be because we don't respect them. And let's just look through it. Why should 2.5 be insulted? How do we justify behavior? This whole middle portion, remember, we're like process of elimination of this can't be why we mistreat children. And then she says again, it must be because it's a child-only problem. Okay, 20 seconds. Have your answer in your head of how does she advance her argument, and then match it to A, B, C, D, or E. Go ahead. All right, 5 seconds. And time. The answer here is A, offering and then eliminating potential explanations. Hopefully we got that one. Let's keep going. 9. The author's tone. Okay, here it is. We were talking about tone a lot tonight. We actually are going to read this entire section because it is short enough and we've got to get to it. So let's go ahead and flip to 42 to 45. Now, why to the insulter? The tone can best be described as, you just use process of elimination. It's right here. So let's just read it. Now why, in the name of reason, courtesy, education, justice, and lofty and noble consideration, why should 2.5 be thus insulted? What is the point of view of the insulter? What's the tone here, just in those 2 sentences? Best guesses, again, use process of elimination. Five seconds. You can do this quickly. I mean, you either know it or you don't at this point. Okay, answer's D, but let's talk this through. This is how I would answer this question. She's not being defensive. She's like being critical, right? So cross out defensive. I know that. Okay, I know witty. I know elated. It's neither of those, so cross those out. I'm down to D or E. Witty means like kind of clever and humorous. That's not what she's doing. Elated means joyful. That's not what she's doing. Now, most of you probably got this as D. However, again, if I'm down to D and E and I have a 50% chance, go with your gut. Ingratiating means you're seeking someone's approval. She's not seeking their approval. She's like exasperated with the problem. She's like at her wit's end. Why is this happening? All right, let's keep going. We have 3 more questions tonight. According to the author, the obvious ground can be ruled out because it. Now, I know those 3 words are quoted, but we're going to go look at them in context. I bolded it. So let's just read that sentence. My annotations are the reason we mistreat children must be because we don't respect them. Is it on the obvious ground of physical superiority in age and strength? Remember, this is when she's starting to try to figure out why are we mistreating children? So why can it be ruled out? Well, let's read the next sentence. It cannot be that, for we do not gratuitously outrage the feelings of all persons younger and smarter than ourselves. So by rereading that sentence, we're going to get this question right. Don't answer this question without flipping back to your annotations. Let that be the lesson here. Go ahead. I'm going to flip back just in case someone needs it. I'm going to read the sentence after it. It cannot be that, for we do not gratuitously outrage the feelings of all persons younger and smaller than ourselves. 5 seconds. And time, the answer here is C. Cannot be generalized to other situations. So that's what we're starting to see here. We can't just assume it's because of physical superiority, because it doesn't happen here. All right, this is an overall passage question, so we're not going to flip back. The author uses the pronoun we throughout the passage. You might need to flip back, like if you're doing this on your own for an example of we, but just think back. Who's her audience? Who is she and the audience a part of? Who's in the same group? Go ahead and try to figure this out. Just use process of elimination. Take about 10 more seconds. We're going to try to do this one a little quicker. Okay. Now, I might have led with too much framing. I was trying not to be so like giving clues because I didn't want to mislead anyone. The answer here is B. Highlight norms of adult behavior throughout the text. And again, you might go back and like find an instance of we or two, but I wanted to show like, let's see how well we can do this like really quickly. If we can do this in 20 seconds, that frees us up a little bit of time, right? So she says we throughout. Let's go find an example of that. Sorry, I'm looking for an example and I forget where it is now. Here, I'm going to go all the way back to the text because I'm out of order because of these questions. Okay, right here. Here's what she's putting herself in the adult audience here. And then let's look again. And then if we had visitors, inciting him to make these blunders, etc. So she's just putting herself, when she's using we, into the audience. Even though she disagrees with the way that society treats children, she is, when she uses we, and I just want to see if you remember that without flipping back, is putting herself at one with her audience. My last question. Again, it's the passage as a whole, so we're not flipping back. In the passage as a whole, the author contrasts which of the following? I'll give you the full 30 seconds. Go ahead. Last one. Ten seconds. Time. Answer A. The treatment of children, the treatment of adults. Now, a lot of you might have wanted to call, on the whole, it's about how we treat language in adults, not how they're learning language. All right, let's wrap up for tonight. I appreciate everyone's engagement. So I know we went a little bit long again. Next week, I do not anticipate going so long. So again, Fiveable Plus members, I hope if you're not a Fiveable Plus member, that you do sign up so you can come back. We got 4 more sessions for Lang. That price, I hope, is worth it alone, to make sure that we're really peaking for our AP exam on May 15th. All right, everybody. Next week, test taking strategies overview. Nothing new, just making sure you have any. And then 3 cram sessions, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, before the May 15th test. We are getting very close. I don't have this memorized how much it is, but it's less than 10 bucks. You can buy, and that's for all subjects if you're in multiple, so you get them all. You can buy a 5 Steps to a 5 book that we talked about last year. Last week for like 15, 20 bucks. This might be a better use of that money if you're kind of on that budget. Okay, and to sign up, there should be a link on your screen. My screen looks different than yours. But if there's not a link to say like buy or sign up now, just Google Fiveable and like you'll create an account. In fact, I'll show you real quick if you're still with me. And if you don't need this, you can log out, but this is how to look at a Fiveable account. So just type in Fiveable. Fiveable.me is the website. Click on it. You'll see Get Fiveable Plus. You'll see it several times. You can't miss it. And then, or you can hit register up here. So once you get to Fiveable's website, it's going to be super easy to create that website. So then you just got to put in your email address and your payment info, and you've got it. So definitely hope you guys can come back. I know it's Fiveable Plus only in May. That is how we're staying as a business, though. So anyway, pretty cheap for hopefully what we can get these last few live sessions. Everyone have a great night. Thanks for sticking with it tonight, and I will see you next Tuesday.